Alrighty. Hello, everyone. I am Seth Cardwell. I am the Community Development Associate on the team, and tomorrow actually makes my 1 year anniversary of being here, so I will no longer be what I consider a Brownfield baby. And before we get started today, I'm going to give Katie a brief introduction if you want to take the floor for a second, Katie.
Thank you, Seth. My name is Katie C. I'm also here at the Brownfields Assistance Center, or TAB, and so my background is in city planning, and so in my previous life I was a city and county planner. So that is a bit of my background, and I want to welcome you all for taking the time to join us today. Thanks, Seth.
And Becca, next slide, please.
Oh, that's us. Okay.
Oh,
Sorry.
right. So to kick us off, since we got our icebreaker out of the way, consider this for a moment. You're a team of 1 or 2 or 3. You're in a small town, and you think that you may not have the capacity to engage on a redevelopment project in your community on your own. Well, that's okay, because help is on the way, and that help can come in the form of many ways. But our expertise is in technical assistance to brownfield communities. So when we came up with the idea for this webinar, we wanted to focus on helping smaller communities to build capacity, because though we work throughout EPA Region 3, which includes urban areas as well, we kind of have a focus in our office too on helping rural communities, because we're stationed ourselves in Morgantown, West Virginia. West Virginia has a lot of rural areas, a lot of smaller towns and boroughs in Pennsylvania as well. In just across the border from Morgantown, they have brownfields, but there are a few people in the community that are dedicated to the redevelopment of those sites, and they kind of struggle to build capacity with teams in those smaller areas. So we recognize and applaud all of the efforts that everyone across the spectrum is putting into redeveloping brownfields, and we want to also thank you all for taking time to join us for this webinar today. And we want you to know that help is on the way. So Katie is going to make me do this transition where I go do 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 do, because we're going to go from normal Bucky, who is our mascot.
You rocked it.
Super Bucky, who has his utility tool belt on and is all ready to help everyone redevelop their brownfield in any way they see possible to help their community benefit. So, talking about where do we begin? The number one step that you're always going to have to do in capacity building and resiliency building is to assemble your team. So how do you assemble your team? Your first step in building your team is going to be increasing your bandwidth and get more help. It's time to recruit, in other words, for your Brownfields redevelopment team. Becca, if you could go to the next slide. So in order to develop your team, some of the things you want to consider are building partnerships. You want to think really broad. You want to consider brownfielders, stakeholders, and others. This includes people in the public sector. It includes people in the nonprofit sector. It includes people in the private sector. We want to think about ways that we can increase our capacity in the best way possible to meet the needs of your community and the residents who live there. So when we talk about brownfielders, that's us at Mid-Atlantic TAB. We're available to help you at every step of the way at no cost. We provide a ton of services, which we'll go more in detail on later. In addition to us, we often work in tandem with state environmental agencies as well as the Environmental Protection Agency. But you also want to consider who it is in your community that's going to really make that project move forward. And these can include, but not be limited to, local and regional governments, community groups, nonprofits in your area or foundations, local redevelopment agencies or councils that may be present in your area. Thinking on smaller scales, property owners, developers, lenders, insurers, investors, and even potential buyers of the sites that you're interested in redeveloping. Thinking outside of us brownfielders and those stakeholders, you want to consider others that you can build relationships as well, and those can include peer communities with brownfield redevelopment experience. So that might mean partnering with a community that's in your area or close to your region that has some experience with redeveloping sites, so you can kind of take advice from them along the way in order to build capacity. And another to consider would be building relationships with qualified environmental professionals, which we often shorten to QEPs. Those are going to be very crucial to your process, because they are the professionals who come in and do the soil testing and, have the final say in those remediation efforts and how the site is cleaned up. Next slide, please. All right. So when we talk about assembling our team, we know that you all are the experts in your community and what your community needs are. And we at Technical Assistance to Brownfields, TAB, I know many of you probably don't know what that is, but we are providing technical assistance to communities and stakeholders to help address their brownfield sites and increase their understanding and involvement in brownfields cleanup, revitalization, and reuse. We are funded through the EPA, and all of the services that we provide to communities throughout Region 3 are available at no cost to stakeholders, and there's never any cost. And we serve DC, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia. And so our goal at this office is to kind of be there and help you every step along the way with that technical assistance process and build strong relationships with community members, because we know that you all are the experts in your community and you know what your community and its residents need to succeed. And we are there to provide that kind of technical expertise lens along the way to help you navigate bureaucracy and the things from the EPA and the requirements that you need to meet in order to redevelop your brownfield sites. Next slide. So we're going to go a little in depth talking about what types of services TAB provides. We have tools for your redevelopment utility belt. I'm going to give you some information on education and outreach, and then we're going to go in depth on EPA grantee support, EPA applicant support, area-wide technical assistance, and then site-specific technical assistance. So we have a broad spectrum of services. There are tools that are more likely to benefit you as you start your redevelopment journey, and our goal is to kind of help you hone in on which tools you might need in order to do so. So we have a couple tools that we want to highlight today, and those will include our Brownfields Bootcamp, which will fall under education and outreach services, inventory support, which will fall under area-wide technical assistance, and we're also going to highlight the site-specific design assistance. Next slide, please. So when we talk about education and outreach, that can include anything from educational webinars and events like today's webinar that we're hosting right now. We can help you create fact sheets and one-pagers to kind of, relay technical information and policy information to your community and to stakeholders as well. We can talk about our Brownfields Bootcamp, which is our Brownfields 101 program, which we'll go into more detail after this. We also conduct community trainings. I'll be traveling tomorrow to Virginia to conduct a community visioning session for a project that's addressing dilapidated buildings. We also help with conference presentations and other general resources as well. So the first tool that we are going to discuss is our Brownfields Bootcamp. And in that, TAB can help with Brownfields education, webinars, or in-person trainings. Our Brownfields Bootcamp is our 101 program that is tailored to fit the community's goals. And looking at that and how that Brownfield Bootcamp is structured, we kind of want to look at how a brownfield is defined, a benefit of redeveloping a brownfield site. We're going to look at redevelopment ideas when you start that redevelopment process. We're going to get creative and start looking at grants and funding that are available to help you finance that project every step of the way. We're going to talk about other aspects of the redevelopment process, and then Katie is going to go in and talk a little bit about some example projects that we've worked on. So our Brownfields Bootcamp program is a customized foundational training that can be done for your community. It can be done just for your redevelopment team, or it can be done with the community in conjunction with training community volunteers on taking inventory in your community. It's a very flexible program, and we typically cover the topics that are in that agenda, and we'll give you a sample of some of those as we move forward. So first and foremost, what is a brownfield? We always like to use the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA's definition of a brownfield, which defines a brownfield as, quote, real property, the expansion, development, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. And so on the right there, you can see that brownfield sites include anything from former gas stations, abandoned railways, vacant lots, former auto shops, factories, warehouses, buildings with lead-based paints, vacant schools, properties adjacent to brownfields because those contaminants can often seep across property lines. So in other words, brownfield sites are nearly everywhere. We have a partner at Marshall, George, who likes to say that anywhere man has been is a brownfield. And I think that that is a very good quote. Next slide, please. So we're going to go into now talking about benefits of cleaning up brownfields in your community. And we're going to go into talking about how they benefit the health of your community, how they benefit environmental justice, the environment, and the economy. Next slide. So going into health, Brownfields often pose a health risk to your community because they can create safety risks, social and economic issues, and overall environmental health issues from exposure to contaminants. The health and safety of people and animals in your community can be at risk if a property potentially presents exposure to environmental contaminants, and if they're not addressed, that contamination can spread to nearby properties. Redeveloping brownfield sites can turn those health and safety risks into community assets by creating funding outlets and opportunities for you to consider the redevelopment of those sites and to also revitalize neighborhoods. And there are a variety of EPA brownfield grants that provide funding to carry out and assess cleanup activities at brownfield sites. Those different grants are more appropriate for specific circumstances based on what you're looking for and what your community's goals are for redevelopment on that site. Next slide, please. And advancing environmental justice. This has become kind of a hot topic recently, and it is now included in EPA grant applications. You have to have a discussion of this. So the EPA Brownfields and Land Revitalization Program helps to educate stakeholders on the importance of integrating principles of environmental justice and equitable development into the assessment, cleanup, and reuse of brownfield sites. Those principles will help to ensure that our low-income and minority residents that are historically impacted by blighted properties or in marginalized regions, and have environmental contamination can reap the benefits of environmental cleanup in their areas. So some of the principles when we talk about environmental justice are thinking about how we can incorporate ensuring access to affordable housing, preventing gentrification in those areas as well, promoting community resilience against climate change, understanding that some communities, especially the communities of color and communities with marginalized populations and in marginalized regions, tend to have a greater risk of climate-based impacts because they, especially in West Virginia, for example, are often associated or situated in areas that have a higher flood risk or things like that. We want to consider ensuring equitable access to amenities such as health clinics and grocery stores. Another big topic that's become a discussion recently, especially in Appalachia, is the presence of food deserts. We want to think about partnering with community-based organizations. So this means building resiliency and understanding how you can meet the needs of every citizen in your community, including those that are in marginalized regions or in historically underrepresented groups. And we also usually talk about reusing brownfield sites for green space and other healthy, safe, and walkable areas such as urban gardens and parks. For example, the Morgantown area has the rail trail, which turned an old abandoned rail line into a recreational trail. Next slide. And we're going to talk a little bit about the environment. Redevelopment encourages environmental sustainability initiatives in a number of ways that can include preserving farmland, forested areas, and green spaces, reducing impervious surfaces, asphalt, and that results in less runoff and localized flooding, which subsequently results in better water quality because you don't get those urban contaminants that run into your area waterways. And reducing those impervious surfaces will make areas less prone to flash flooding. Brownfield redevelopment keeps developments in a central location, which often improves air quality in those areas. Improved air quality is also associated with reduced greenhouse gas emissions from vehicle travel. And the reason that brownfield redevelopment keeps developments in a central location is that those sites are often located in close proximity to existing infrastructure and in close proximity to downtown sites. And those are areas like former rail hubs, former rail stations, abandoned rail lines. Those are things that have access to existing infrastructure and can be easily redeveloped and tapped into in their redevelopment, and can also be a close hub for the community's downtown area. And the redevelopment of these sites plays a vital role in encouraging sustainable land and energy use practices that work towards long-term climate solutions. So our goal is, rather than looking at green fields that you might want to develop and cut the trees down and put impervious surfaces down, our goal is to look towards those properties that are already contaminated and already developed and have that ability to connect to existing infrastructure and make that connection and redevelop those sites to revitalize areas in your community. Brownfield sites, as I mentioned before, offer those connections to existing infrastructure and promote sustainable growth and development, including the opportunity for the use of renewable energy on those sites. Next slide, please. And the economy. So jobs and housings can be supported on brownfield sites, which boost your local economy, especially in those downtown areas, which they are often in close proximity to. They reduce the need for infrastructure expansion. Redeveloping brownfield links economic vitality with environmental benefits as well. A little statistic here, according to the EPA, 11 to 13% of jobs and housing growth expected between 2013 and 2030 could be supported on the redevelopment of brownfield sites. So they benefit local communities and increase your revenue. They kind of reduce suburban sprawl, which promotes the economic expansion outside of city limits, meaning that development does not create local revenue for city centers that maintain local infrastructure. And brownfield sites are typically located in or near those downtown areas and directly spur local revenue and jobs in close proximity to those areas as well. And I'm going to hand it over to Katie, who's going to talk to us a bit about EPA grantee support.
Thank you, Seth. You did a great job. I just want to kind of take a brief pause here to say Seth covered a lot, and we are gearing this webinar to talk to communities with low capacity. And if that sounded like a lot to digest and process, that's okay. We get that. That's why we're here to help. Again, maybe my superpower is that I'm nerdy and I enjoy talking about planning, long-term planning and visioning for communities. And so we can help you try to synthesize and think about all this that you've heard and understand how to put together, whether that's a successful EPA Brownfield grant application, which we'll talk about a little bit later, or how to tap into some of these resources and see how you can start to apply some of these elements that you've heard and start to put it together to be a good package that can ultimately help your community redevelop those brownfield sites. So again, we get that it's a lot to process, and that's why we're here to help you be able to understand this, and just don't hesitate to reach out. So Seth, again, talked about the education piece. That's one of the ways that TAB can provide assistance and support. One of the other ways would be existing EPA grantee support. So we are not highlighting one of those elements today, but it is important to let you know how we can help. So if you are an existing EPA grantee, we can help with state cohort facilitation. Sounds kind of fancy, but what that means generally is we have gone to the state brownfield conferences within EPA Region 3, and we've had sessions there for existing or new grantees, and it's an opportunity for us to meet one another, for the applicants to meet TAB and the EPA representatives and also that state environmental agency, and just have the chance to understand that you're not in that alone, right? You have other communities throughout your state who are going through the process. The timing may be a little bit different, and you could also benefit from that, right, by understanding their experience. So that's what we mean by that. We can help you set up your cooperative agreement and support you through that process. As you're getting ready to kick off the grant, the pieces that go into making that come to fruition, we are available for that. RFP support, then when you get ready to select your consultants, community involvement, we love to do that. We love to let you know some suggestions for how you can make that as robust as possible, whether that's meeting with you virtually, or we can go try to help facilitate meetings. And then also grant debriefs. If you applied for a grant, you were not successful, we, along with the EPA, always encourage you to request a debrief so that you can understand where you did not score as high, and so you can understand how to improve that and then make that better and get that grant in the next round. Next slide, please. So EPA applicant support, webinars such as what we're doing today and workshops. That's one way we try to help those who are seeking an actual EPA brownfield grant. Grant planning consultations. So if you want to just set up a time to meet with us individually, we can do that. Folks on our TAB team, again, it's not just us here at WVU. We have multiple partners now, and we'd be happy to meet with you or a small group in your community. We understand that it's kind of a pain to set up SAM.gov and grants.gov and sometimes administer that, but it's critical. And so we're always here to help you go through that process if you hit any snags. Grant review. So if you've got that grant drafted and you'd like a second set of eyes, we're happy to do that. And then again with the debrief. So if you've met with the EPA and they gave you some feedback and you're just maybe not quite sure of some of that feedback, we can also go through that and help you understand that a little bit better. Area-wide technical assistance. This is another kind of umbrella task of how we can help. Inventory support is what I'm going to discuss here in a minute, and business and brownfield walkabout. That's something that we have the ability to help you with. We can go to your community, start with a virtual call, to meet the team, explain the process, and then we can go to your community so you can start to understand and visualize how you can redevelop those areas in your community. As Seth said, a lot of these brownfield sites are in downtown, and for these individual sites or clusters of sites that are currently not active and they're eyesores, we can help go through this process and help you understand where you may be able to start to piece that together and see how it could be so much better in your community. And state program support. So there are a lot of resources that the individual states have, and so we often serve to connect you, the community, with the state environmental agencies so that you know that how helpful they are, and their information is provided later. Next slide, please. So inventory support. We like to say that you really don't have the ability to understand what the existing conditions are in your community and how many sites you're dealing with until you actually conduct that inventory. We really have encountered folks who say, we don't have any brownfields, but we remind you of we like to remind them of the definition that Seth covered earlier. And that can even be an old school or hospital where they used asbestos and lead-based paint. That one doesn't seem as obvious to a lot of folks because they may not be falling down and dilapidated. But again, because those are issues that need to be remediated and cleaned up, that is a brownfield. And so, starting to understand that, the basic definition and starting to put together an inventory again is a great start for your community. And we are here to help you do it in a community-led way. So you put together information, and we have tools and templates to help you understand putting together the information for each specific site. So what you do is establish your team. And so again, we would initially probably set up the call virtually so we can explain the process, then go to the community and work with your team to do either a windshield survey or walking around the community so you can start to identify those sites that meet that brownfield definition. And then we map the process, and you've got the information as we state here with the address, owner, tax information. And so you can start to see the status of those properties. So are they delinquent in taxes? How long have they been sitting idle? And so with the ability to map that, and we have a mapping tool that's pretty easy to use that we share with your community, then you start to see where they are and how close in proximity they are to one another. So again, are you talking about, thanks Becca, are you talking about one big abandoned site that's been in the community for a while, or maybe you're talking about 5 or 6 sites that are pretty close, and then you could look to redevelop that and have a pretty big robust redeveloped site. So, by actually taking the time to go through this process, this helps you do that. So again, we'd be happy to do that. And, just reach out with any questions. As Seth said, he's actually traveling tomorrow to help a community in Virginia work through this process. They've been working on it for some time, and they're finally nearing the completion part. And once they get that inventory, again, then they can see visually where are these sites, and then that helps you understand to plan. And then you could apply for example, an EPA Brownfield Assessment Grant so that you can start to use some planning dollars to create that vision for the area, and then also conduct the phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessments. Next slide, please. So going through the inventory process gives you the opportunity to see how you can redevelop the sites. Again, by doing the walkabouts, that's a way that we can do that. We can have assistance. We have actually consultants here as the tab provider that can help us do that and help us help you. And so again, the inventory process allows the community to think through that and see that it doesn't have to stay the way that it is. And we have a couple of inspiration ideas on the next page. next slide, I should say. So these are just hopefully a source of inspiration for you, former brownfield sites. This one's here in West Virginia. It's in the Eastern Panhandle in Shepherdstown. It was a former landfill site, and now it's a public library site. So that one it took several years, you know, as a typical brownfield redevelopment project does. But now you can see it is a beautiful contributing asset to. This is just one of the ways that I get trigger happy here. Just one of the ways that you can actually see what again such an ugly site could turn out to be. So next slide, please. Thank you. This one's also in West Virginia. It's in the southern part of the state in Huntington. So you can see that it is now a fire station. And so this one used a variety of resources. You can see, so this they involved a regional planning council here in West Virginia. And so also got a regional commission together, one of their planning commissions. And so this one involved multiple partners coming together to turn this into, again, an abandoned site. And now it's you know, it is an essential, it serves for essential purposes for the community. Sorry about that. So again, two examples that we hope kind of give you an idea of, you know, what can be in your community. And so we don't like to dwell on the negative part. We do like to really make sure communities see there are so many resources and so many people to help take this process through until you can end up with a much better product for your community. Next slide.
Real quick, Katie.
Oh, good.
We had a question in the chat. Could you touch on, just kind of summarize how community members identify brownfield sites in their local area? Maybe a taste of what that training may include?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I'm going to punt this one to Seth since he's fresh off of this with going to Virginia. But we have tools that we'll share with the community in advance. But I think Seth is he's got this pitched down pretty quickly.
Yeah, so in the current project that we're working on right now, we have a tool called Regrid that links with county assessor data. So it can show us, you know, past uses of the property and ownership data of the property as well. So we use that to kind of conduct the inventories when we go into communities. But when you're identifying those sites, we'll refer back to the slide that had all of the pictures with those former sites. Anything like that is considered to probably be a brownfield site, as well as things like when you do an environmental site assessment of phase 1, that includes a property record search. So you're identifying those sites based on previous uses, which of course you have to do a property record search for that in order to figure out those previous uses. But we like to do what are called windshield surveys. We often say that we do not condone trespassing when we're doing inventory, so we don't go on sites, partially because we don't have consent to do so yet, and also partially because it's a health and safety hazard if you go on those sites. So we kind of look from the windshield to see, what we can observe. Do we see any, you know, above ground storage tanks or things like that? Are there any abandoned rail lines in close proximity? Does it look like there was some type of petroleum storage or something on the site? Was this a commercial dry cleaner site? Things where chemicals could have contaminated and seeped into the soil. And of course, in areas like West Virginia, you're going to look at former mine sites, former industrial sites, areas where there have been a lot of like chemical manufacturing or glass manufacturing or things like that. So it's basically using good judgment in the first step, going through your community, kind of looking around and looking for those indications and knowing what the indications are when you see those properties to kind of mark it as a potential. And then when you start your redevelopment process and you go through the first phase of the environmental site assessment, that's when you get your probable answer of whether or not there's likely contamination, because that's when they'll do the research and dig a little bit deeper and look at those property records and see what the past uses were and whether that poses a risk of contamination on the site.
Thank you both.
Excellent. Thanks, Seth. I had a thought, but I lost it. Oh, one thing we like to say also is that once you come away with that inventory list, it is yours to keep for the community. Obviously, we have a copy, but it's not anything that we display because we understand that calling a property a brownfield site is a sensitive thing for some property owners. They only see the negative connotations. So it's the list for you, your community to keep, and, you know, again, start to work through the process for those next steps that you can take. And so we are here to help you go through those processes and start to understand that. So I hope that helps a bit too. Thanks, Becca. So site-specific technical assistance is another way that we as the tab provider can help you. And that is when we get a lot of calls from folks who say, you know, we have this site in our community, we're not sure what to do with it, or we have the site in our community and we have an idea of what to do with it. These are the steps we're starting to take. So we can help you with that. And one of the ways is design assistance. And we're just gonna have a couple of slides to highlight some of that example here. Community involvement and facilitation. Again, planner nerd here. This is something we like to do. So we can help your community do that. I think we've all come to terms with the fact that hybrid is here to stay. You know, there's a lot of benefits to that. So there are good ways to incorporate that community involvement in a virtual capacity, but also in person. It's still very important to do in person. So we can help do that as well. Resource roadmaps. We have consultants who can help us do that when a community has an idea, when they're a little bit further along in that brownfield redevelopment process and they have an idea of what they would like to have as the end product on a site. We can employ the assistance from one of our consultants to help put together a resource roadmap so a community can see all the various resources available for starting to fund that actual project. And so we also can help you with ownership and property transferring with consultation for that. And one thing, if you know anything about us, you'll always hear us say, do not purchase a property without having conducted a phase one. And by purchase, we mean don't take it for $1 and don't let someone give it to you without having gone through a phase one assessment. You will hear us say that all the time because it's very important. If you are looking to apply for an EPA cleanup grant and you have not gone through the phase one process, that makes you ineligible for funding. So it is that important. Now, if you have deep pockets and you have the ability to pay for the cleanup yourself, it's not a big deal, right? But if you do want to seek that funding, those are examples of why we like to stress the importance of that. VRP and VCP support, so that's the voluntary remediation or voluntary cleanup program that's available through your state environmental agencies. So I saw one of our gals, Erin, on here. She's with the West Virginia DEP. She's probably hiding out, hoping I don't call out on her. But we pitch people to her all the time because our team is really great. Our team here in West Virginia for the environmental agency and all the folks that we've started to establish relationships with throughout EPA Regions 3. Fantastic. So if you have any questions and you need to understand that process, we can help introduce you to one another and facilitate that conversation. And then redevelopment roundtables. So that's another way we can, again, start to help you brainstorm to see what's next. Next slide. Design assistance. Don't have a lot of context here, but just want you to see, again, we have a few teams here, a few of our partners here on our tab team who can help your community with a visioning and preparing some renderings so that you can see what this brownfield site could look like. So we have the University of Delaware team, we have West Virginia University Community Engagement Lab, and then we also have the Virginia Tech Community for Design. And I think I butchered that line, sorry about that, but it's Virginia Tech, Delaware, and WVU. So you can see in this top left photo, in this situation, these renderings came to us from one of our consultants, but this is an existing stick of some homes. So not quite townhomes, but they are attached. So you can see they prepared a vision to show what it could look like. And in this situation, it looks like the bones of the structures are good, but they're showing you how you can add some variation and detail to make it a more inviting residential area. So, it's always very cool to see something like that because it's not always easy to see what that photo in the top left could look like, but it sure could be a great final product. Next slide, please. And this is a great example of downtown. Who would have thought, that you could take these two buildings that don't have interesting facades and turn them into something that has a lot of detail and variation, and it looks really, really cool and inviting. So these are some examples, and these are just buildings, right? Not just buildings, but these are examples of renderings showing you buildings that are currently existing. The teams can also help you with coming up with a vision for a vacant site, and also a site that has a building. So maybe it's a building or a few buildings on site that are dilapidated, and unfortunately you may not be able to save them. They can also go through this process with your community to prepare some renderings and conceptual plans to show you what it could look like. And so we'd be happy to put you in touch with the team to let you know about that. It is, they do work with the students. So a lot of the manpower comes from the students. And so we need to work through that with the timing on the semester with some of these projects. So if you have an idea in your community, please reach out. We would love to help, and our TAB partners who do this design work would be fantastic to work with. So, again, hopefully this shows you a little bit of inspiration, because also we think that there's so much value in being able to go through, for example, that inventory process with your community when you're out hitting the streets and trying to see what these sites are, and you can't quite envision what the outcome could be. And then you can end up working with our team to have this as a takeaway. And so just to, again, see the start process and start to, get this sense of what it could be. And then you can take that to the community for some buy-in. Just really helps to energize, everyone to see what it could be. So let us help you with that. Next slide. All right. So what tools do others on your redevelopment team bring? I just love this slide. It's very fun. All right, so the EPA has a lot of helpful tools. So we're just going to touch on some of those. That includes technical assistance through the EPA, targeted brownfield assessments. We like to try to clarify that, since we are TAB and this is TBA, it gets a little confusing. EPA grants, and then we just want to highlight the EPA Assessment Coalition grant because of the nature of today's webinar. Next slide, please. All right, thanks, Becca. So when it comes to technical assistance available through the EPA, they have assistance that's available at no cost to you. This is such a fantastic resource for low capacity communities, or maybe a community that may have a little more capacity, but they really only know of maybe one site that could use some brownfield redevelopment assistance. And so each EPA region has a contact person. We have our own. And so we'd be happy to put you in touch with the EPA, so you can have a call to start to discuss the site that you may have in mind and see what assistance and services they may be able to provide. So you can see that the technical assistance is meant to help the community figure out what type of reuse is actually feasible, because it's one thing to have grand ideas, but it's another thing to actually do the research and see if it could actually would it be supported in your community, and would it thrive, and understanding where the market is, could it support that? And so that's, again, fantastic tool, no cost to use, and it's available through the EPA, and the EPA is wonderful to work with. Next slide, please. Also, the targeted brownfield assessments. So this is, again, another first step for the communities with low capacity. A lot of times these do serve as a first step, and it's really good for establishing a relationship with the community and the EPA, so that In this, it's really beautiful because it is a rolling application. So there's money allocated through the EPA. And so there's not a hard and fast deadline as you have with the EPA brownfield grants. And so we can, again, put you in touch with the EPA, and there's funding available. And so it gives you the opportunity to discuss that site, and the EPA has the contractor. So you do not have to work with a contractor. You don't have to select a contractor. And it's a grant of services. So it's not money for you to go and set up the grant administration. The EPA is taking care of that. And so it gives you the opportunity to go through phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessments and allow you to start to plan for cleanup of the site. And so they can also coordinate with, again, those state environmental agencies for either the voluntary cleanup program or the voluntary remediation program. So we just can't say enough great things about this, because for a lot of communities, this serves as the first step to being able to successfully apply for an EPA brownfield grant. And with the other assistance that I was talking about, a lot of times that can be in coordination with other resources too. Next slide. EPA grants. So the 3 of the main EPA grants are assessment grants, and that allows for funding to actually go through the inventory process. As we discussed, it allows you to start to do some planning for the sites that you've identified within the target area in that application. And then it gives you the funding to go through those environmental site assessments. So you get a good chunk of an assessment grant can go to actually the planning work and the visioning and starting to come up with some ideas, again, to see what site or cluster of sites may actually be able to be feasible for redevelopment. So it's a great grant, and there are subcategories of the assessment grant. I'm going to talk about the one that, again, we want to focus on within this webinar a little bit later. Cleanup grant. So when you've gone through the assessment and you have a sense of, after phase 2, what needs to be done on the site, you have an idea of the general cost that it could be to clean up a site, then you could apply for a cleanup grant, and that would give you the funding to be able to get a site more developer ready. So whether that is remediating the building itself, or if some variation of some demolition needs to happen with the building, and then also cleaning up the soil and how to make that okay for future uses. Again, depending on the type of use that would happen, would it be residential, park, commercial, more industrial? So that gives you the opportunity to understand how intense the cleanup needs to be. Multi-purpose is just what it says. It's the ability to do assessment and cleanup funds for 1 or more brownfield sites. It is a more complex grant. It would not be a good one to go for your first time around, because it's a lot to manage. Because it's both an assessment grant and a cleanup grant are a lot to manage individually, and this is where you're managing both. It's a great one to have. It's probably not one of the better ones. Another grant that's available is a revolving loan fund grant. Chose not to highlight that one today because it's its own special kind of beast. So again, wanted to focus on these. Next slide. So again, as I was touching on earlier, there are different types of the EPA assessment grants. One that we want to highlight today that you may not be aware of is the actual coalition grants. I think there are going to be some changes within the grant guidelines coming up this fall in some of the language about the definition of a coalition, but generally this is a good one for smaller communities because you have a lead partner, and that is one who's had some more experience, and they partner with some smaller communities or organizations, so that you've got a couple of different areas that you'll focus on for conducting those assessments. And then it gives that smaller community the opportunity to learn from those with more experience. So that's also a great thing to consider as well. You can read more about that on the EPA website, but again, we wanted to bring that one to your attention. Next slide. Thanks, Becca. Becca is reminding us that next week we have a webinar that is talking about putting together your coalition. So you should definitely tune in and check that one out. Some other tools. So as you recruit members to your redevelopment team, brainstorm about how they can help. No one knows it all. And so we all bring different experience to these projects. And so, you know, each community's team is different, and that's okay. And so, again, as Seth was saying, we most of the team here on our West Virginia tab team are from West Virginia, but we do work here in West Virginia, so we understand how challenging it can be, you know, when you come from a small town. And so just understanding who could be supportive and helpful as you go through this process is really important to starting to put together that team. And so we hope that, you know, you will consider your tab provider as part of your team, because we're available throughout all the steps in the process. And so all you have to do is reach out. There are no silly questions. If we don't know the answers, we reach out to find someone who does know the answer, and then that helps us be able to answer the question the next time for someone. And then never underestimate the benefits of reaching out to other communities who have brownfield experience. It may be someone who's starting at the same time as you and you're both learning together, or it may be someone who has just finished, you know, managing an EPA grant or going through the brownfield redevelopment process. So there's a lot of value in that because that allows you to share stories with one another and you know, swap resources. So that's one thing that we hope comes out of when we attend, again, these state-specific brownfield conferences, is when we have that organic conversation for those existing EPA grantees to have. So there's so much value in that. And so we hope you will consider that.
Katie, I got a direct message in the chat. Do you have any advice for environmental consulting firms who might be here today? As a small business firm, how can they work for brownfield projects? How can they kind of put themselves out there and like let redevelopment teams know that they want to be part of a redevelopment team? How can they get more involved?
That's an excellent question. I'm sure our director, Carrie, would answer this in different ways. And if someone else on the call has a suggestion too, please feel free to jump in. But I think one thing is to continue to attend events that we have like this, and attend events throughout the region. You know, in September, we have the West Virginia Brownfield Conference coming up. Just 2 weeks ago, we attended the Virginia Brownfield Conference. You know, we don't specifically recommend environmental consulting groups, you know, here. It's like how it was when I was working for government, right? But what we do is we are here to help communities understand what are some good things to look for. And, you know, there are times when we can suggest a group of consultants to consider, you know, because we don't want to show favorites, but the more we know about you too, the better that is. And so, you know, we're working on trying to make ourselves here as the tab provider more of a resource bank with our website. So that's something that's in the works right now, so that we're hoping that we can be able to share RFPs and RFQs and projects from around the region. So, you know, hopefully something like that could give you the opportunity to get some exposure. I don't know if I'm, you know, given the greatest answer for that, but I think just continued exposure, because I know I've personally learned from a couple, and I think Carrie, our director, has too, just within the last year. And, you know, we've said, oh, hey, you know, welcome aboard. And maybe they hadn't, and I know they hadn't had a presence in West Virginia, but, you know, now they're starting to show up and be more present. And so then when we get to know them, then we all start to establish a relationship. So I hope that helps a bit.
That was great. Thank you.
Okay, and jumping back to me for some wrap-up material. First, I want to say thank you again to everyone for joining the webinar today and taking time to learn more about our efforts throughout EPA Region 3. And we hope that today's webinar has inspired you to let TAB supercharge your efforts and increase your capacity to redevelop your community, because guess what? We're on your team now. So you know where we are, you know where to find us. You'll have our contact information after this, so we'll be there to provide technical assistance wherever you all may need. But before we get into the wrap-up information, I'm going to let Becca run a quick poll in case anyone has to drop off before the end of the webinar.
Perfect. So if you've got the latest version of Zoom, a poll should have just popped up. And if you could just answer that again, rate your current understanding of EPA Brownfields grants. I'm gonna let that run for a minute, but feel free to continue on if you'd like, Seth.
Gotta move the little box off my screen. Okay, Becca, could you go to the next slide, please? So going over our upcoming events, Katie already touched on these briefly, but next week, July 16th at 12:30 Eastern, we'll be having a webinar on assembling your coalition for a successful assessment grant. And then September 10th through 12th in Summersville, we'll be hosting our West Virginia Main Street and Brownfields Conference, which I would encourage you all to attend because it is a fun time and we have usually good food and drinks at the reception and great conversations. So what more could you ask for? Next slide, please. And we've compiled some links here. All of these are active hyperlinks. So when we send out the slides after the fact, all of these links should work to take you to some information on Brownfield grant solicitations, our website, FAQ, some more information on environmental justice, and then more into Region 3 success stories and EPA Brownfield grant locations if you're interested in looking at those. We'll be sending out the slides after the webinar, and if any of those links don't work, you can always feel free to use our contact information to reach out to us, and we'll be sure to get the correct link in there and get it fixed. We're also attaching links for all of our state environmental agencies throughout EPA Region 3 and the contact information for those people as well. Next slide, please. And then, of course, Mid-Atlantic TAB again. We are the regional provider to EPA Region 3, and us at West Virginia University are working on rebranding our partnership from just WVU TAB into Mid-Atlantic TAB. So we've developed a partnership with folks at Marshall University, at Virginia Tech, West Virginia University, and the University of Delaware, Biden School of Public Policy and Administration. So we've got a great group here, and we are an independent resource that provides support and guidance to help communities understand acquiring, assessing, and cleaning up and redeveloping brownfield properties. We'll help you understand the health impacts of those brownfield sites, can help with site design, how science and technology are used for site assessment, remediation, redevelopment, and reuse of brownfield sites, and also how to comply with voluntary cleanup requirements for those sites. Next slide, please. And then these last two slides are just our personal contact information in case you want to reach out to us. And then the very last slide that we have was just our contact with our direct email for WVU TAB. That is also Mid-Atlantic TAB. We're still working on the rebrand, so we'll direct your question to the right place if something comes to that inbox. You can also sign up for an individual one-on-one consultation using the link provided there. And we also have links to our Brownfields website and newsletter. And of course, we encourage you to stay engaged and follow us on social media on Facebook, X, or Instagram at WVU TAB.